The robe felt heavier than it ever had in Atlanta. In the cramped robing room of the makeshift federal courtroom in Belmont, Georgia, Judge Vivian Ashford Tate stood in front of the mirror and watched herself disappear under black fabric. The sleeves slipped down her forearms and brushed the yellowing bruises still wrapped around her wrists like ghostly handcuffs. The mirror showed a black federal judge in her late 30s, lifetime appointment, Article 3 power, the kind of woman sheriffs and senators normally called Your Honor with careful smiles. But that was not who she saw. She saw an 18-year-old girl standing outside the iron gates of the Merriweather estate, night flashing blue and red, bare feet on cold gravel as deputies dragged her father, Raymond Ashford, toward a waiting cruiser. She saw Colton Merriweather, younger, softer, closing the gate while she begged him to say it was a mistake. Step away from the vehicle, hands where I can see them. The words weren't in the room, but they pulsed in her skull, tangled with the stale scent of gasoline and the crackle of a radio announcing approach with caution. 14 hours in a holding cell had pressed the past and the present into a single, suffocating layer. On the table beside her lay the reason she'd come back. A toxicology report with her father's name and arsenic levels underlined in red. Eugenia Merriweather's neat handwriting in a leather journal that read like a confession. Bank statements from First Republic Belmont tying asset seizures to deposits in something called the Merriweather Family Trust. An email printed on cheap copy paper. Subject line, Ashford Matter, between former Sheriff Harlan Merriweather and banker Leland Crutcher. Evidence, not rumors, not grief. Paper and ink and numbers that could knock the paint off the myth of Belmont's traditions. For 20 years, she had carried another kind of evidence, the quiet guilt of leaving. She had built a career in courtrooms where her last name was just ink on a nameplate, not a stain on a small town's conscience. She had sentenced men to prison in the name of a justice system that had failed the very first man she ever loved, in the very county she'd refused to set foot in again. Yesterday, Belmont had put her in a cell for driving a rental car that fit a description. Today, she would put Belmont on the record. Vivian reached for the file, fingers tracing the edge of the Ashford Matter email. Her pulse climbed, a slow drumbeat under her ribs. This was supposed to be a simple civil rights hearing on an unlawful detention. She knew better. The moment those exhibits hit the screens, today stopped being about one bad traffic stop and started being about an entire dynasty. Merriweather, Crutcher, Whitwell. The names hung in her mind like a row of portraits waiting to be taken down. A knock split the silence. Your Honor. The bailiff's voice came muffled through the door. All parties are present. Her throat tightened around a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She slid the file under her arm, adjusted the collar of her robe, and flexed her fingers once, feeling the dull ache where metal had dug into skin the night before. I'll be right there, she said. When she opened the door, the corridor beyond buzzed with the low murmur of a packed rural courthouse trying to play at being federal. Fluorescent lights hummed. Someone's bad coffee burned in a styrofoam cup on a windowsill. Through the crack of the courtroom doors, she could hear the soft shuffle of bodies, the creak of wooden pews, the rustle of reporters' notepads. Vivian stepped up to the threshold and glanced through the sliver of space. At the defense table sat Sergeant Colton Merriweather, badge polished, jaw clenched, hands folded so tightly his knuckles blanched. From this angle, she could see the side of his face, the same sharp nose and stubborn line of mouth she remembered from behind those iron gates. He stared straight ahead at the empty bench, not yet understanding who would walk out and sit above him. To him, she was still just a black woman with a stolen car. He had no idea that the next time he heard all rise, the woman in robes would be the same one he'd shoved into the back of his patrol car last night. What if they don't care that you're following the rules? Vivian heard her own voice, low and flat, as she sat in the rental sedan at the edge of the Route 12 gas station lot. The sun was still high, heat shimmering off the asphalt. Tractor trailers growled past on the highway. The question hung in the stale air of the car like smoke. For most of her career, she had believed the opposite. Rules were the point. Rules were the only thing standing between justice and chaos. She had built a life on that faith. Belmont, Georgia, was where that faith had been born and broken. 2 days earlier, she had turned off the interstate at the faded sign that said, "Welcome to Belmont, where tradition meets tomorrow." Someone had taken a can of black spray paint to the last word. Now it just read, "Where Tradition." The empty space where tomorrow used to be made more sense than whoever had put the slogan up in the first place. She drove past it anyway. The town looked smaller than it had when she left at 18, but meaner in the daylight. The white clapboard church on the hill gleamed, new siding, fresh steeple, tidy lawn. Down on the low side of town where the black families had always lived, porches sagged and paint peeled. A thin blue line flag hung in the window of the hardware store, sun-faded but proud. In the diner window, a hand-lettered sign advertised law enforcement discount in big friendly letters. She kept her sunglasses on and her head down. Just another black woman in a gray rental car with out-of-town plates. The name on the contract was her real one, Vivian Ashford Tate. The desk clerk at the budget counter in Atlanta had not cared. In Belmont, the name Ashford was carved into people's memories in a different way. She had learned how to tuck it into the middle, let Tate take the weight. If anyone asked what she did now, she was a legal consultant working out of Atlanta. That answer was true enough to sit comfortably in her mouth and vague enough to move the conversation along. She chose the crummiest motel on the outskirts of town. The neon vacancy sign flickered. The room door stuck before it opened. The carpet smelled faintly of old cigarettes and discount disinfectant. She had stayed in worse for less noble reasons on circuit. Cheap motels were good for not being seen. In the mirror over the dresser, she wiped off the careful makeup she wore in Atlanta courtrooms. No foundation, no eyeshadow, just a bare, clean face, and a twist-out that had frizzed a little from the humidity. She pulled on a soft t-shirt, jeans, plain sneakers. No pearls, no tailored blazer, nothing that said federal judge. Under the bed, she slid a hard-sided case that did not look like much. Inside, behind a false panel and plain shirts, were neatly tabbed folders and thumb drives labeled in her own precise handwriting. Ashford, Merriweather, Crutcher, Whitwell. They felt less like files and more like live wires. If I have the evidence and the law, the truth wins. Eventually. She had said that sentence 100 times to skeptical defendants, to law clerks, to her own reflection on bad days. In Belmont, the words tasted different. This was the place that had followed every proper procedure while railroading her father into prison. The warrants had been signed, the hearings had been held, the boxes had all been checked. Due process had been weaponized, and nobody paid a price but Raymond Ashford. She lay awake half the night listening to the highway, running the plan again and again in her head. File the complaint. Meet Tobias. Confirm what Eugenia had hinted at in those shaky letters. Coordinate, not freelance. Use the system, do not just scream at it. Morning came too early. Across town, Sergeant Colton Merriweather's alarm went off at 5:30. He swung his legs out of bed, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and took a moment to listen to the quiet of his kitchen. The house was modest, a 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of a subdivision. But in Belmont, people still called it the Merriweather place, even though the big estate with the columns still belonged to his father. He poured coffee into a chipped Braves mug, kissed his little girl on the head as she shuffled in with her blanket, and listened to the local news hum in the background about a storm front and a county fair. Morning, Sergeant, the anchor chirped in a promo for a community segment he'd filmed last week. He half smiled, embarrassed and proud at once. On the way into town, he stopped at the same diner his family had used for years. The bell over the door jingled as he walked in. Heads turned in a chorus of "Morning, Sergeant," and "How you doing, Colton?" met him before he even made it to the counter. He liked this part, the sense that he meant something here, that the badge on his chest wasn't just metal. Old Mr. Jenkins clapped him on the shoulder on his way out, muttering about kids drag racing on county roads. The waitress, with the tired eyes but soft smile, topped off his coffee without asking and slid an extra sausage patty onto his plate. "You catch that meth head broke into the Dollar Mart last week?" she asked. "Working on it," he said, and he was. He worked his cases. He wrote his reports. He showed up in court in a pressed uniform and told the truth as he understood it. That was the job. That was how his grandfather had done it, how his father had done it before he ran for sheriff and won in a landslide. His father's house was on his way to the station. He did not have to stop. He almost did not. Then his turn signal clicked, and he found himself rolling up the long drive he had traveled 1,000 times. Inside, the Merriweather estate was a museum to law enforcement and local power. Plaques lined the walls. Photographs showed 3 generations of Merriweathers shaking hands with governors, posing with a young Senator Vernon Ashworth, cutting ribbons at new patrol posts. A framed front page from the Belmont Times hung above the mantel. Merriweather sworn in as sheriff with his father Harlan standing in front of the courthouse steps, hat in hand. "Back door's open," Harlan called from the kitchen. Colton found him at the table, gray hair a little thinner, shoulders still broad. The old man was reading the paper like the internet had never been invented. "You're on days this week," Harlan said without looking up. It was not a question. "Yeah. Good. Folks see that patrol car more when the sun's out. Reminds them we're still keeping order." There it was. We, not you. This was the family business. Ever since his grandfather pinned a badge on his father in a black and white picture that still floated around the station, Merriweathers had been the law in Belmont County. "We're doing good work, Dad," Colton said. Harlan finally looked up, eyes sharp. "As long as you do it by the book's got your back." That was the creed. That was the point. Follow policy. Write it clean, keep your nose out of trouble, and your loyalty inside the circle, and the system would hold. Misunderstandings got smoothed. Complaints went nowhere. Lawsuits died in paperwork. Colton carried that belief with him into the locker room at the sheriff's office. He pulled on his uniform shirt, straightened the patches, checked his duty belt by feel. Deputy Ramona Vickers leaned against the metal row of lockers, radio clipped to her shoulder, her own shirt still open as she tied her hair back. "You see the tow logs from last month?" she asked without preamble. He shrugged. "Which ones?" "The ones with all the improper parking and unsafe equipment that just happen to be black drivers on the south side. Feels like we're stretching things kind of thin." "We enforce the code," he said, tugging the Velcro on his vest tighter. "If it's on the books, we can write it." She frowned. "We're towing a lot of black folks on pretty thin excuses, Sarge. One day this is going to come back on someone." He snorted and slapped his vest once, more theater than necessity. "Relax, Vickers. We're covered. As long as we're within policy, no one's touching us." She watched him a second longer than he liked, then shook her head and went back to lacing her boots. On his way out to the lot, he passed the memorial plaque in the lobby with the names of fallen officers, all carved in brass. Merriweather, Whitwell. The same families, generation after generation. Tradition, stability. He felt it under his feet with every step. Out on the highway that afternoon, Vivian drove with both hands on the wheel, cruise control set just under the limit. The rental smelled faintly of whatever chemical they sprayed on the seats between customers. Her laptop bag sat on the floor in front of the passenger seat, zipped. Her phone lay face down in the cup holder. She had spent the morning at a storage unit outside town with Tobias Wren, the journalist who had nearly ruined his career, trying to tell the truth about her father's case. He had aged. Lines etched deep around his eyes, but that restless spark was still there. They had gone through boxes of copied court records, bank statements, deposition notes. Every so often, he would pull a document and mutter, "You seeing this pattern yet?" And she would nod and feel something cold settle more firmly in her chest. Patterns. That was what she understood best. In her courtroom, she had sentenced men not just for what they had done, but for what the evidence showed they would likely do again if nothing changed. Recidivism, risk assessment, probation, sentencing guidelines, the language of control, measured and polite and deadly. Here, the pattern looked different. It looked like black-owned construction businesses hit with fraud charges whenever a big contract came up, asset seizures that emptied accounts days before trial, quick pleas pushed through so fast defense counsel barely met their clients, money flowing from seized properties into accounts with family names on them. She had held those documents in her hands and felt the weight of them, the way other people might feel the weight of a weapon. Now, as she signaled into the gas station, she forced her mind back to the mundane. Half a tank, time for fuel, maybe a coffee, a moment to breathe. She parked at the far edge of the lot, away from the pickup trucks, and the beat-up sedans pulled close to the store. When she killed the engine, silence rushed in behind the ticking of the hot metal. What if they don't care that you're following the rules? The question surfaced without her permission. Her law professors had always loved hypotheticals. What if the system fails? What if the jury is biased? What if the judge is corrupt? But they had framed those what-ifs as edge cases, not as the backbone of entire counties. She opened the glove compartment and checked the contents again. Rental agreement, insurance card, the little pamphlet from Budget about what to do in case of an accident. Everything was in order. Her driver's license was up to date. Her registration was legal. Her tags were valid. If something happens, I have my paperwork. I know the law. I can cite the statutes. They will have to listen. It felt almost childish, the way repeating the alphabet had felt when she was 5 and scared of the dark. She had spent so long on the side of the bench where people believed she was the system, not a person who could get dragged into the back of a squad car. It was disorienting to acknowledge that out here, in jeans and a t-shirt with no ID visible, she was not Judge Tate. She was just another black woman in a neutral-colored car. She exhaled slowly, pushed open the door, and stepped out into the heat. Back at the station, the afternoon call load had been light. A noise complaint, a fender bender, a welfare check that turned out to be a drunk uncle asleep on a porch swing. Colton cruised the edge of his jurisdiction, one eye on the road, one on the mobile data terminal mounted between the seats. The air conditioner rattled, barely keeping up. Static crackled over the radio, followed by the dispatcher's calm drawl. All units be advised. Possible stolen sedan, Georgia plate, November Tango 472. Last seen southbound on Route 12. Use caution. Vehicle flagged by Atlanta PD. He straightened in his seat. The screen on his terminal lit up with the same information, the plate number glowing in bold letters. Stolen vehicle. That was not a thin excuse ticket. That was a real crime. Something clear. Something he could act on without squinting at the codebook. He keyed his mic. Unit 3. I'm on 12 now, about 5 miles north of the county line. I'll keep an eye out. Copy. Unit 3. He clicked the mic back in place, a small surge of adrenaline waking him up. This was the job at its purest. Spot the suspect, make the stop, control the scene, write the report, hand it off. Let the rest of the system do its work. The idea that the system might be wrong did not even cross his mind. Atlanta PD sent the hit. The state database flagged the plate. The dispatcher pushed it out. It was all one machine, and he was a cog in it. Cogs did not question blueprints. They just turned. Up ahead, the Route 12 gas station sign rose above the trees, its prices half missing from the board. A gray sedan sat by the far pump, angles familiar in the way all rental cars looked like each other. His eyes dropped automatically to the back bumper. NT 4-7-2. Bingo. His pulse kicked. He could already see the narrative forming in his mind, the one he would tell later when guys at the bar asked about his shift. Caught a stolen out of Atlanta. Clean stop. Textbook. As he swung the cruiser into the lot, he felt oddly calm. He had done this 100 times. There were protocols, steps, checklists. If he followed them, he was safe. If he followed them, the county was safe. That was what he had been taught by academy instructors, by field training officers, by his own father sitting at that kitchen table with a mug of coffee and 70 years of family legacy behind him. Do it by the book. The book's got your back. Across the lot, Vivian glanced in her side mirror and saw the black and white roll in. Light bar off, presence heavy. Her eyes flicked to the plate on her own bumper. November Tango 4-7-2. The numbers matched the echo she had just heard on someone's radio through an open truck window. Her throat went tight. For half a second, the parking lot wavered, doubling as the courthouse steps where deputies had once slapped cuffs on her father while neighbors watched. Then she made herself breathe. You have the agreement. You have the license. You have done nothing wrong. He is just doing his job. He was. And they were both walking, separately and unknowingly, into the same afternoon with the same quiet certainty. Colton believed that as long as he followed policy, no one could touch him. Vivian believed that as long as she had the law and the facts, no one could really hurt her. Neither of them had yet learned how wrong that was about to be. The radio crackled just as Vivian stepped out of the car. She had one hand on the fuel nozzle when a voice bled from the open window of a pickup 2 pumps over, the dispatcher's tone flat but urgent. All units be advised, vehicle matching description of stolen sedan out of Atlanta. Georgia plate November Tango 472. Approach with caution. The numbers matched the plate she'd just checked in her rearview mirror. For a split second, every sound in the lot sharpened. The whine of a distant cicada, the clank of a diesel pump locking into place, the hum of the ice machine. Then tires crunched over gravel, The patrol car swung in fast, light barred dark but presence blazing. Vivian did not turn her head. 20 years of legal training slid over raw instinct like armor. Sudden movements drew attention. Attention drew escalation. She kept her arm frozen halfway to the pump. Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. The voice came from behind her, amplified by authority and the echo chamber of her memory. Her father had heard those words once in front of their house, in a different tone, but with the same intention. She lifted her hands slow enough that anyone with a finger on a trigger could track every inch. "Ma'am," I said, "step away from the vehicle." The boots came closer. "Right now." She exhaled through her nose, took 2 small steps forward, and stopped where the concrete changed color. The sun burned the back of her neck. Sweat slid between her shoulders. "Turn around, slow." She turned. Sergeant Colton Merriweather stood 3 feet away, one hand resting on the butt of his holstered gun, the other hovering near his radio. His jaw was tight. The same gray-green eyes she remembered from a lifetime ago scanned her face with no sign of recognition, just the cold calculus of risk. Black female, alone, late model sedan, flagged plate, suspicious. "License and registration," he said. "My wallet is in my purse," she replied, keeping her tone even. "In the front seat. I'm going to reach for it, but I'll move slowly. All right?" His fingers tightened on the grip of his gun, like the word slow were an accusation. "I'll get it. You stay right there." He moved past her, close enough that she could smell coffee and deodorant and the faint metallic tang of gun oil. He opened the passenger door without asking, dug through her bag until he found her wallet and flipped it open. "Vivian Ashford Tate," he read. "Atlanta address." He turned the license toward her photo, then back to her. If the last name hit any old nerve, it did not show. "Where you headed, Ms. Tate?" "Visiting," she said. "Some family, some old friends." "Uh-huh." He dipped back into the car, grabbed the rental agreement from the glove box where she'd left it visible, because she understood how these things were supposed to go. "You always rent a car to visit family." "Sometimes it's easier," she said. "Less wear and tear on my own." He barely glanced at the agreement. The VIN, the contract number, the fact that it had been signed yesterday at Hartsfield-Jackson meant less to him than the fact that her skin was dark, and the plate number matched the voice in his ear. "Step back from the car," he said. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I've complied with every request," she said quietly. "You have my identification. You have proof this is a rental in my name. Under Georgia law, you still need probable cause to detain me." He laughed once, humorless. "Under Georgia law, I have a hit from Atlanta PD and a vehicle that matches it sitting in my county. That's enough for me to make sure this isn't stolen." "You can verify that by running the VIN and calling the rental company," she said. "That would take 5 minutes." His eyes narrowed. There it was, the tiny flare of male pride, of small-town authority, used to going unchallenged. The tone. That was what he reacted to as much as the words. Here we go again, he thought. Another one who thinks watching some YouTube video makes them a lawyer. "I know how to do my job," he said. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job." She did not tell him she had been doing a version of his job from the other side of the bench for nearly a decade. She did not tell him how many arrest reports she had read that began with a hit and ended in an excuse. Instead, she said, "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that dragging me to a station when you can resolve this right here is unreasonable." He stepped closer. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe authority stretched him. He moved into her space until she could feel his breath on her cheek. "What's unreasonable," he said softly, "is that every time we stop somebody with a bad plate, we get a lecture about rights. I'm not here for that today." "Sergeant," a new voice cut in from the edge of the lot. Deputy Ramona Vickers approached at an easy jog, one hand resting on her belt, the other shading her eyes. She took in the scene in a single sweep. The gray sedan, the black woman with her hands up, the way Colton's shoulders bunched. "You want me to run the VIN?" she asked. "Call the rental company? It'll take 5 minutes. If it checks out, everybody goes home." "That's what I suggested," Vivian said. Colton did not look at either of them. His jaw flexed. He could feel something slipping, control bending under the weight of two voices suggesting he might be overstepping. It triggered the same defensiveness that always rose when Internal Affairs sent out emails about policy updates or when some city kid sued over a traffic stop. "I said I got it," he snapped. Vickers held his gaze for a heartbeat. Something passed between them, a warning she'd voiced in the locker room, now sharpened by context. He looked away. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he told Vivian. Her pulse spiked. She knew the script from 100 transcripts, 1,000 hearings. This was the line between investigation and seizure, between inconvenience and arrest. "You're detaining me for vehicle theft without probable cause," she said. "Everything in your possession shows this car is lawfully rented." "Everything in my possession could be forged," he shot back. "You're being detained for investigation. If it checks out, you'll be on your way." Detained. Not arrested. Not yet. A word game that looked better in reports than it felt on the end of metal. He took a step back, hand already on the cuffs. In that brief gap, Vivian's mind ran the options like branches on a flowchart. She could pull away. She could raise her voice. Force the other customers at the pumps to turn, to record, to intervene. She could shout her real title, throw the weight of her office at him like a shield. "I am a federal judge. Take your hands off me." For a moment, the sentence vibrated at the back of her throat. Then another voice rose louder in her memory. A younger Colton at the Merriweather gates, his face pale in the rotating blue lights. "There's nothing I can do, Viv. I'm sorry." He'd closed the gate in her face, and the sound of it slamming had followed her out of Belmont and into every courtroom since. She dropped her hands behind her back. "Badge number," she said calmly as the metal circled her wrists too tight on purpose. "For my records." He hesitated, surprised she had the presence of mind to ask. 6722, he said. You gonna write it down?" The cuffs clicked. Pain shot up her arms. She sucked in a breath and fixed her eyes on the dash cam in his cruiser, the small red light on his chest where the body camera blinked. Good, she thought. Let it see everything. He guided her toward the patrol car with a hand on her arm that was just shy of rough. Vickers watched them go, her expression unreadable. "You sure you don't want me to just make that call?" she asked quietly. "Already in motion," he said, opening the back door. "We'll sort it out at the station." Cooperative verification, he would call it later in his report. That sounded better than dragged a woman in on a hunch and got it wrong. The ride to the station blurred into a series of sensations for Vivian. The taste of metal in her mouth, the cage dividing the front and back seats, the way the town rolled past in glimpses, the courthouse where her father had been sentenced, the bank where they'd frozen his accounts. The white columns of the Merriweather place on the hill, still standing, still immaculate. At the sheriff's office, they walked her through the lobby. Conversations paused. Heads turned. A black woman in handcuffs in Belmont was not new. The quiet, level way she walked, the way she asked again for his badge number and the exact time of detainment was. In the holding area, a deputy she did not know swung open a heavy metal door and gestured inside. "Step on in, ma'am." She did. The cell was small, concrete bench, stainless steel toilet in the corner, fluorescents buzzing overhead. The cuffs came off with another sharp bite of pain. She turned as they backed out. The door closed with a sound that hit her spine like a hammer. For a second, she was 18 again, on the wrong side of iron bars, watching her father disappear, while people who called themselves good Christians turned away. Then she was 40, Judge Vivian Ashford Tate, counting beats until the recording devices could be subpoenaed, and every smug word Colton Merriweather had said would become part of a record he could not control. Outside, at a metal desk, he sat with a clipboard and a keyboard, filling in blanks. Black female, mid to late 30s, alone. Vehicle matched description. Subject became argumentative. Subject detained for verification. He paused over the word argumentative, then left it. It played well in reports. It justified extra caution. It was the kind of word that had saved officers before when things went sideways. He signed his name at the bottom, feeling his pulse finally steady. This is within policy, he told himself. I did what I had to. He had no idea that this was the line he had just crossed, and everything he thought the policy would protect was already starting to crack underneath him. The light never went off. It buzzed and hummed above Vivian's head through the whole night, turning the concrete cell into a fishbowl. Every time she drifted toward sleep, there was a noise. A door slamming somewhere, a laugh from the hallway, boots passing by as if she were an exhibit, not a person. 14 hours of being watched and ignored at the same time. A deputy dropped a styrofoam tray through the slot once, eyes sliding over her like she was part of the wall. Another came by to count bodies, giving her that quick up-and-down look black women knew by heart. None of them asked why she was there. None of them seemed to care. By the time the lock clacked the next morning and Colton appeared at the bars with a clipboard, her back ached and her wrists throbbed where the cuffs had bitten deep. "You're free to go," he said. "No charges at this time." At this time. He said it like it was nothing, like it was just phrasing. To Vivian, the words were a leash he was leaving coiled on the floor. In the processing room, they handed back her watch, her phone, her wallet. She signed without reading the forms, but she memorized every detail around her. The clock above the desk, the case number, the nameplate of the clerk who slid the paperwork across. When she reached her car in the impound lot, she did not start it right away. She sat behind the wheel, opened her notes app, and typed, "Time of stop. Time cuffs applied. Badge 6722. Phrases used. You people. Possible stolen sedan. Detained for investigation. Evidence, even if nobody else knew it yet." Internal Affairs was on the second floor of the county administration building, down a beige hallway that smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. The man behind the glass window looked like he had been doing this longer than she had been alive. He pushed a complaint form toward her without interest. "Name, date, incident," he said. She slid the completed pages back. He skimmed them. When his eyes hit Colton's name, something in his face shifted. "You should know," he said quietly. "Complaints against the Merriweathers tend to disappear." He said it with the weary tone of someone who had watched that happen more than once, not a threat, a warning that had given up on itself. "That is why Mean is going to the state and the feds too," she replied. "This is your copy." For the first time, he really looked at her. "Ashford Tate," he murmured. "Huh." At First Republic Belmont, the air was cold enough to sting. Marble floors, brass railings, a Bluetooth speaker somewhere playing soft jazz. The receptionist's smile faltered for half a second when Vivian gave her name, then recovered. "Mr. Crutcher can see you now," she said. Leland Crutcher's office was all glass and polished wood. He rose with a politician's practiced warmth, hand outstretched. "Ms. Tate, welcome to First Republic. Please, sit." He flipped through her application file, lips pursed. "Everything looks in order. Identification, initial deposit. But there is a flag on your application. Recent interaction with law enforcement." "That interaction was an unlawful detention," she said. "I was released without charge." "Still," he said, sympathy painted on, "we take risk very seriously. We may need additional documentation, tax returns, letters from your current bank, proof of employment." The door opened without a knock. Mayor Orson Whitwell stepped in, tan and smiling, tie just loose enough to signal he was everybody's friend. "Leland," he said. "Sorry to barge in." His gaze landed on Vivian. He did not know her, but he knew her type, or thought he did. "Passing through, ma'am?" he asked. "Visiting," she said. He gave her a kindly smile that never touched his eyes. "Word of advice. Belmont is a small town. It rewards people who fit in, who do not go looking for trouble where there is none." He clapped Crutcher on the shoulder and left. The door clicked soft behind him. The message did not. Vivian closed the account packet without comment, gathered her documents, and walked out with her head high. She felt the anger settle under her skin, not as heat, but as focus. Back at the motel, her phone buzzed. "Heard you had an interesting night. Welcome back to Belmont." The text was from a number she had not seen in years and would have recognized anyway. Tobias Wren, the reporter who had been the only one to question her father's case, while everyone else printed press releases. They met at the same diner off Main where he used to buy her sodas when she was a teenager, trailing behind him, listening to him talk about open records like they were magic spells. The place had not changed. Vinyl booths cracked at the seams. Coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since 1993. The waitress called everybody Han and topped off cups until they floated. Tobias had gone gray at the temples. His suit jacket was frayed at the cuffs. The eyes behind his glasses were as sharp as ever. "You look like you won," he said as she slid into the booth. "I spent the night in county," she answered. "Depends on your definition." He opened a beat-up briefcase and laid out copies of bank records, his fingers careful on each page. I never stopped digging, he said. Transfers from First Republic into the Merriweather Family Trust. Dates line up with your dad's indictment. With other indictments, too. Whole pattern of folks getting squeezed, assets seized, then money walks into those accounts. Vivian traced a column with her fingertip. Dates, amounts, case numbers she recognized from the files Eugenia had referenced. The anger in her chest shifted again into something colder, heavier. Not just a bad stop, not just one racist sergeant on a power trip. A machine. Across town in a cramped conference room at the sheriff's office, Colton sat in a plastic chair while a captain from Internal Affairs read from a sheet. A formal complaint has been filed regarding your stop on Route 12, the captain said. We are required to notify you and open a preliminary review. Vickers sat along the wall, arms folded, watching him. I told you we should have just run the VIN, she said when the captain stepped out. He rolled his eyes. IA never sticks to us. My dad says Internal Affairs is just paperwork. They check the boxes. We keep doing the job. You sure about that? She asked. He was. Mostly. That night, after his shift, he picked up 2 guys from the department at a bar on the edge of town. They were still in civilian clothes, guns left at home, but the way they carried themselves screamed cop. The motel sat under the highway like it was hiding. He parked far enough away that the cruiser would not be on the cameras. He walked up to Vivian's door with his fist already clenched and knocked hard. Ms. Tate, he called. Open up. We need to talk. Inside, she froze for half a second, then moved quietly to the door, stopping just short of the peephole. In my experience, she said through the cheap wood, voice calm, 3 off-duty cops at a woman's motel room at night is not usually about talking. This is my town, he replied. You do not come in here, stir things up, throw around accusations, then act surprised when folks push back. Your town, she said. Funny. I grew up here, watched my father taken from here. If anybody has a right to stir the dirt, it is me. Through the thin door, their past stood between them, unspoken and loud. His buddies shifted on their feet, suddenly aware they had stepped into something deeper than a simple intimidation visit. The first wave of consequences had arrived, and it was no longer confined to forms and policy. It was pressing at motel doors, breathing down necks in glass offices, and whispering through the diner where old men sipped coffee and pretended not to hear the ground beginning to move. The pressure didn't ease after that night at the door. It tightened. 2 days later, Tobias called before sunrise, voice sharper than coffee. Storage unit got hit, he said. Locks busted. You'd better see this. They met at the row of metal doors on the edge of town. His unit's padlock hung twisted, the latch bent. Somebody went shopping, he muttered, stepping over the threshold. Boxes had been opened and shoved back haphazardly. Files were scattered, lids half on, half off, but the shelf where the worst of it had once sat was bare. I moved the heavy stuff years ago, Tobias said. They're rummaging through my leftovers. She knelt, flipping through what remained. Old clippings, duplicates, enough to be annoying, not enough to be fatal. On her way back to the motel, she saw it before she even reached the car, the driver's door slightly ajar. The glove box sagged open, the center console drawer pulled out. The cheap laptop she'd left on the back seat was gone. She opened the trunk, checked the false floor where the real hard drive had been hidden 3 cities ago, still there. She exhaled. Good, she whispered to herself. Take the bait. At Internal Affairs, the same tired officer slid a manila folder toward her. Preliminary review is open, he said. That's all I can tell you. He hesitated, then palmed a business card like he was dealing contraband. State Civil Rights Division, he said under his breath. If your complaint disappears here, call them. Use my name. Their eyes met. For a second, she saw the resignation crack. Not everyone in this building was proud of the way things worked. Some were just surviving it. That afternoon, she drove slowly down Maple Street. The house she'd grown up in was painted a different color now, with a sleek porch swing from some catalog hanging where her father's rough wooden one used to be. The new owners had planted hydrangeas. They were beautiful. They looked like they belonged to someone else's childhood. A few turns later, she crested the hill where the Merriweather estate sat behind its iron gates. White columns. Perfect lawn. Same as the night they took her father. She pulled to the shoulder and turned off the engine, fingers gripping the wheel. What if I came back just to let them break me twice? She said aloud. What if this is all they ever do to people like us? No one answered. The house stared back, blank and patient. Inside those walls, Harlan Merriweather sat in his leather chair, a ball game on mute, his oxygen tank hissing quietly by his wife's recliner. "You did right," he told Colton, who stood by the window, arms folded. "You see a plate flagged, you act. Don't let some loudmouth DA or fancy lawyer scare you with big city talk. This is our county. We know who belongs and who doesn't." Across the room, Eugenia watched through plastic tubing and tired eyes. Her fingers worried the edge of a blanket. When Harlan said belongs, her gaze flicked to her son and flinched, just barely. Back at the motel that night, the conversation at the door picked up where it had left off. "You need to drop this," Colton said through the thin wood. "File your little complaint if it makes you feel better, then go back to Atlanta." "You sound just like your father," she replied. Silence stretched. His friends shifted again, suddenly less sure of their place here. "You know my dad?" he asked. "I know he dragged my father out of our house in handcuffs 20 years ago," she said. "I know I stood at your gate crying, and you looked at me and said, 'There's nothing I can do,' and shut it in my face." The words seemed to blow some of the swagger out of him. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "I was 18, he said. "I was scared. My father, you don't say no to him in this town." "You didn't even try," she said. "You just watched." A long pause. One of the other men cleared his throat. "Sarge, maybe we should go." Footsteps retreated down the concrete walkway. Engines turned over. Headlights swept across the curtains, then disappeared. She stayed by the door a while longer, forehead resting against the cool surface, feeling anger and something almost like grief twist together. At dawn, a soft scratching woke her. An envelope slid under the door, pale against the dark carpet. She picked it up. No name on the outside. Inside, a single sheet of stationery in careful, looping handwriting. "I've been sending those letters for years. Come to 47 Magnolia Lane. Come alone. E. Merriweather." Vivian read it twice, heart thudding. There was a crack inside the fortress after all. 47 Magnolia Lane smelled like bleach and waiting. Curtains half drawn, oxygen machine whispering, TV on mute. Eugenia Merriweather sat in a wheelchair by the window, skin paper thin, eyes still sharp. "You look just like your mother," she said as Vivian stepped in. From beside the chair, she dragged out a worn cardboard box. Inside lay 20 years of secrets, journals, bank statements, printed emails between Harlan, Crutcher, Whitwell, photos of Magnolia Club dinners, a toxicology report with Raymond Ashford's name, and lethal arsenic levels underlined. "Your father didn't die of heart failure," Eugenia whispered. "My husband had him poisoned. I was too afraid to stop him." Later, at a diner just over the county line, Ramona Vickers slid into the booth in jeans and a hoodie, flipped open a leather wallet, and let an FBI badge catch the light. "I know who you are, Your Honor. I did my homework," she said. "We have pieces. You have the key. Eugenia just gave you the fuse." Her proposal landed like a verdict. Vivian would not just file a complaint. She would preside over the civil rights hearing on her own detention, put every document from that box into the official record, and trigger a wave of sealed federal warrants waiting in the dark. That night in the motel, Vivian laid her black robe on the bed beside Eugenia's box. For years, she'd told herself that if everyone simply stayed in their lane, the system would eventually right itself. Staring at the two objects side by side, she finally understood. Systems did not correct anything on their own. People did, or nothing did. Tomorrow, Belmont's proud tradition would be dragged into the light by the black judge it had cuffed and thrown into a cell. Colton sat at counsel table, palms damp, waiting for some faceless federal judge from Atlanta to walk in and make an example of him. All rise. The Honorable Judge Vivian Ashford Tate presiding. The back door opened. She stepped out in black robes. For a second, the room tilted. The woman he had shoved into a squad car was suddenly 10 feet above him, the seal of the United States at her back. His mouth moved without sound. "Viv." Body cam footage rolled on the monitors, his own voice saying, "You people," his hands tightening cuffs on a woman holding a valid rental agreement. Then the bank records, Merriweather Family Trust on every page. The email titled Ashford Matter, Eugenia's journal entry, the real toxicology report. He stood. "Permission to approach," he said, voice shaking. Granted. Did my father have your father killed? Her eyes did not soften. The evidence strongly suggests he arranged your father's murder. Something inside him finally snapped free. He asked to testify over his lawyer's protest, and for 2 hours he told the truth. The thin excuses for stopping black drivers, the unwritten orders, the way his family name had been a shield. When it was over, the court found that he and 2 deputies had violated 18 U.S.C. 242. Their badges were gone, their careers over. The Belmont Sheriff's Office was placed under federal oversight. Outside the courtroom, FBI agents cuffed Harlan Merriweather, reading off charges that sounded like a life collapsing. Across town, Leland Crutcher and Orson Whitwell met their own sets of handcuffs. Weeks later, in a smaller courtroom, a judge signed the order vacating Raymond Ashford's conviction. His photograph sat framed on a table. Vivian spoke quietly. "Justice delayed is still justice owed," she said. "Today, at least, this debt comes due." At the back of the room, Colton watched. When her eyes found him, he did not come forward. He just gave a small nod, an apology he could not put into words, and walked out into a life with no badge, no shield, and no illusions about what his family's name had ever really stood on. A year later, the Belmont sign still leaned at the county line, paint peeling where tomorrow used to be. Under it, someone had bolted a small metal plaque. "In memory of Raymond Ashford and all those wrongfully convicted. May justice prevail." The sheriff's office had federal monitors coming in and out. New recruits sat through hours of bias and civil rights training. First Republic Belmont was under federal supervision, its old executives gone, its lobby a little quieter than before. Tradition was still there, but it walked with a limp. On Tuesday nights, in a church basement on the south side, Colton stacked folding chairs for a youth program. No badge, no gun, just a name that no longer opened doors. After a town hall on policing, he found Vivian in the parking lot. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I'm just trying to spend what's left of my life doing something that isn't built on lies." She looked at him for a long moment. "That is between you and the kid you used to be," she said. "Just make sure the kids you talk to never have to make the choices you did." Back in Atlanta, her docket filled with new cases: wage theft, housing discrimination, another county where traffic stops told their own quiet story about race. Belmont was not a wound anymore. It was a map legend, a reminder of what lay under the surface in 100 other small towns. One evening, her phone rang. The voice was warm, smooth, practiced. "Judge Ashford Tate, this is Senator Vernon Ashworth. I have been following your work. There may be opportunities ahead. Perhaps we can discuss your future over dinner." On her desk, inside a manila folder marked Magnolia Club, lay a photograph from Eugenia's box. December 1999. Harlan Merriweather in a tux, standing shoulder to shoulder with a younger Vernon Ashworth, crystal glasses raised in a private toast. After the call, she opened her laptop and wrote a simple email to Tobias. "Start digging on Senator Ashworth." Magnolia Club. December 1999. She knew now justice was not one big win that fixed everything. It was a series of small, stubborn decisions. How you wrote the report, whether you spoke up in the locker room, what you did when your family name was on the line, whether you used your title to cover the rot or pull the floorboards up. Consequences did not only arrive to punish, they arrived to show you who you had become. And no one got to hide behind, "I was just following orders forever." That night, Vivian sat by her apartment window, Atlanta glowing below her like a circuit board. In the voice-over of her own thoughts, she could still see Belmont. In that town, they once put a black judge in handcuffs because they refused to see who she really was. The next day, they saw her in robes. But the loudest truth was never what they did to her. It was what they had been doing, quietly and confidently, to everyone without a robe for generations. If this story made you feel something, do not just turn it off and forget it. Ask where the Belmont is in your own world. And if you want more stories that dig into justice, power, and the people caught underneath, hit subscribe, leave a comment, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your attention is what keeps these echoes alive.